I worked the night shift at a logistics warehouse on the edge of the city, the kind of industrial zone that looks unfinished even after decades. Half-paved access roads, long rectangles of concrete, and sodium lights that never fully decide if they're on. If you drive past the place in the day, it looks ordinary. If you pass it at 2 in the morning, it looks like a memory you're not sure you had. My shift started at 10:30 p.m. and ended at 6:30 a.m. The crew was small, 2 drivers staging early runs, 1 picker who preferred nights because he didn't like people, and me in the little office with the cameras, the radio, and a stack of forms no one reads. By 1 a.m., I was usually alone. The drivers left. The picker wore headphones and drifted through aisles like a sleepwalker. The building took on a sound I can still hear if I let myself. The constant fluorescent hum layered over a slow, irregular ticking, metal cooling, racks settling, air moving in a building designed for things, not for people. The warehouse had 6 loading doors on the north side. Thick, ribbed steel panels, inward roll-up, the kind with chains you yank down to lock in place. Every night at close, we went through the same checklist. Dock plates up, locks on, interior bars slid, green safe lights off. I liked the ritual. Routines make large spaces feel less like they're watching you. The checklist had been photocopied too many times. The letters were fading into gray smudges. Still, I ticked each box with the same pen, the same pressure. I did it partly for the job, and partly because it felt like the only boundary between me and the quiet. It was late winter, the kind of cold that finds any gap. Around 2 a.m. on a Thursday night, I felt a draft on my ankles inside the office and assumed I'd left the door cracked. The door was shut. The tiny heater under the desk was doing what it could. I brushed it off. Old buildings breathe. I sipped stale coffee, filled out a bill of lading for a morning pickup, and glanced at the monitors. 6 camera feeds tiled on a 20-inch screen. Most of them showed nothing. Empty aisles, the long corridor to the north bays, and the shadowed rectangle of the staging area where shrink-wrapped pallets sat like anonymous monuments. On the north corridor camera, something looked wrong. It took me a few seconds to understand what. The little rectangle at the end of the hall, the gap beneath door 4, had a sliver of light that shouldn't have been there. It wasn't bright. It was a thin silver line, like a knife slipped under a lid. The exterior lamps poured a weak glow under the panel, and you could see particulate drifting where the cold met the warmer air. It meant the door wasn't seated. I told myself it was obvious what had happened. The bar hadn't caught, or I'd rushed the lock and the chain had snagged on a notch. It happens. The building shifts in cold, the power blips sometimes. It's never anything, until it is. I took the flashlight from the pegboard, clicked the little radio to the security channel, and stepped out. The north corridor is a long run of concrete and fire doors. If you stand there alone at night, you can hear your own breath loud enough to make you feel like you're being inconsiderate. The air was colder than the office. I walked toward door 4 with the kind of deliberate, even steps you take when you want to hear everything else in the building. The closer I got, the more certain the draft became. It felt like the building was exhaling through a seam. The door itself was down, no obvious gap except at the floor. I crouched and saw that the rubber sweep at the bottom wasn't touching the concrete. Someone had pulled the chain, the panel had rolled down, but the latch hadn't caught the track. The metal sat a fraction high, enough for air to thread under. I slid the interior bar out of its cradle and tugged the chain to seat the panel. It didn't move. The chain had resistance I didn't expect, as if the door were already locked against something solid. The little green indicator lamp that shows door closed was off. The red door open wasn't on either. No status, no acknowledgement, just air moving over my hands and a faint metallic vibration in the panel. I set the flashlight on the dock and checked the latch on the left track. Clean, then the right, clean. I put my shoulder against the door, leaned into it the way you lean into something that isn't supposed to push back, and felt, just barely, an answering pressure from outside. Not a person, not a shove, something like wind with a weight to it. A pressure that knew I was there. It made no sense in a way I could write on a form. The radio on my belt clicked once and then cut off, like someone had pressed the mic for a fraction of a second. I tapped it, dead hiss. I clicked to the other channel, still hiss. The office always kept a dead zone at this end of the hall. Tonight, the dead zone kept me. I stood there longer than I should have, listening to the building, trying to sort ordinary sounds from the kind your brain looks for when it wants a story. The rattle of chain against panel, the tiny scratch of dust across concrete, the breath you mistake for wind until it matches your exhale. I gave up on the chain and moved to the manual release, an emergency pull that drops the panel if the mechanism fails. I yanked it. The door settled that last fraction of an inch, and the sweep met the floor with a rubbery sigh. The sliver of light disappeared. The draft faded. The sense that the building had decided something also faded. I slid the bar back into place. In that one small moment, the world went back to ordinary. On the walk back to the office, I felt watched. It wasn't a supernatural feeling. It was the plain feeling you get when you remember all at once how far the nearest person is. The warehouse at night has depth you can't see in daylight. The aisles run long and dark, and every pallet wrapped in shrink has a shine like an eye if you catch it at the right angle. I kept my eyes on the floor and counted my steps. I do that when I don't want to think. Back at the monitors, I scrolled the playback on the North Corridor cam for the last 10 minutes. The footage showed me walking down the hall, the light sliver visible under door 4, no one else, no motion. When I stepped out of frame to work the chain, the camera watched an empty rectangle of concrete. When I came back, the door was seated. No surprise. Cameras prove ordinary things first. I felt the small, normal relief you feel when the footage aligns with what your body remembers. The rest of the shift passed in that slow way. Nights pass when nothing happens, and the fact that nothing is happening begins to stand for something. I filled out the maintenance log for door 4 with a note about the latch. I left a sticky on the supervisor's desk. I told myself I'd check the door again before the end of shift. The heater under the desk clicked on and off with the same patient rhythm. A small machine doing its job without complaint. I counted down the hours to dawn. I slept badly when I got home. A kind of surface sleep where your body lies still, but a part of your mind remains in a cold corridor under a dead camera. When I dreamed, it was of the thin line of light under a door and my hands pressed flat against metal. The next night, I did the checklist earlier. I went to door 4 at the start of the shift and threw the bar twice just to feel it catch. Fine. I pulled on the chain just to be sure. Solid. I swept the rubber seam with my palm. No draft. On the way back, I paused at the end of the aisle and looked down the long ribbed backs of shelving, rows spaced evenly like teeth. The picker moved in the distance with his dolly, a little shape under a high ceiling. He didn't look up. I didn't call out. The radio on my belt crackled once, then settled. Around 1:40 a.m., the office draft returned, a thin line of cold against my ankles. I glanced at the monitor by reflex. Same sliver of light under door 4. Same dust twirling in that meeting of air. Same wrong stillness in the old building. Nothing else moved on any camera. The picker had gone to break or was in an aisle not covered. The North Corridor was empty. I felt the small drop in my stomach you get when your body hears about a problem, a fraction before your mind does. This time I took my time crossing the corridor. I told myself I was looking for signs, prints, scraps of plastic, anything the door might have pinched. The concrete kept the dust of the day in a fine, even layer. Near door 4 there were scuffs I couldn't place. Not shoes, not wheels. Something like a wide, shallow smear. Like someone had dragged canvas across the floor and lifted it without leaving a clear edge. It began near the door and curved away toward the staging area. Following it with a flashlight felt like following the logic of a half-remembered dream. You know where it goes before you see where it goes. The smear ended behind a stack of shrink-wrapped pallets. I stepped around and found nothing. Just the wrap catching my light in a way that made me feel like my light wasn't mine. I went back to the door. The sweep still hovered just above the concrete. I reached toward it and felt the draft notch colder, as if the outside had leaned in. It was subtle, the difference between open and closed eyes in someone pretending to sleep. I dropped the manual release again. The panel settled with the same sigh. The draft left. The small logic of the world resumed. I slid the bar into the cradle and held it a second longer than needed, as if holding a thought in place made it more true. When I turned to go, I saw them. Bare footprints. Not clear, not sharp, but there in the dust. Ball, arch, heel, slightly smudged by the air leaking under the door, tracked across the corridor toward the pallets. Bare, human, adult. Not many. 4, 5. It's hard to count when your mind pushes your eyes around. They were spaced like a careful walk, the kind of stride you take when you don't want to make noise. Every hair on my arms rose like a small field of weeds. I stood there longer than I should have, memorizing the pattern and saying ordinary things in my head. Condensation. Old marks revealed by the draft. Workers changing shoes. Anything. I followed them because there was no version of the night where I didn't. They led to the same stack of pallets where the smear had ended. I circled them and found nothing again. No prints on the far side. No prints returning. Dust holds a record until it doesn't. I crouched and aimed the light under the lowest pallet. Just darkness and a ribbon of plastic dangling and catching the light like a line on water. The longer I looked, the more I felt that looking was the part that mattered. I stood and scanned the upper racks, as if a barefoot person would substitute altitude for logic. I listened for any breath that wasn't mine. All I heard was the building, hum, tick, that faint throat-clearing sound old metal makes when the temperature changes a fraction of a degree. The warehouse at night is a church that forgot what the sermon was, but remembers how to wait for it. Back in the office, the footage showed what it always shows. Me walking down, the sliver under door 4, me out of frame, me back in frame, nothing else. When I zoomed into the floor near the pallets, the camera's compression turned the dust into a moving field of gray. You could tell yourself those were prints if you needed them to be. You could tell yourself anything you needed, and the camera would nod along. I considered calling the supervisor at home. I didn't. You learn not to be the person who cries wolf in a building with 6 wolves painted on the emergency exit signs. I wrote a note instead. Door 4 draft again. Check latch. Possible exterior seal issue. And placed it under the maintenance log. I made a polite mark in a world that only answers to polite marks during business hours. The third night, the routine replayed with minor changes, the way routines do when they teach you what to expect. The draft came earlier, around 1:05. The sliver under door 4 looked brighter, though I know that's how the brain talks when it wants you to move. In the corridor, I found new prints overlapping the old ones, only these were angled differently, as if someone had turned to look back toward the door while walking away. They ended sooner, nearer to the center of the corridor, and they felt newer, not because they were clearer, but because my body told me they were. I followed them until they ended, then kept walking slow circles like a dog scenting. The air had that charged stillness empty places sometimes have right before something ordinary happens and feels like a miracle, like a light turning on when the bulb has been dead for months. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until my chest hurt. When I exhaled, the air felt colder, like I'd given something inside the building what it wanted. The radio crackled again. Not a voice, just the sound a throat makes before speaking. I pressed the transmit and said a practical sentence, the kind you say to prove you're still in the world. North corridor check, door 4 latch. No one answered. I clipped the radio back and told myself I had tried. I opened one of the empty freight crates near staging. The sound it made, wood rubbing against wood, should have been loud in that space. It wasn't. It seemed to stop at my ears. Inside the crate was nothing but dust arranged in a pattern my light made. I tapped the bottom. Solid. I closed it. It sounded the same as when I opened it, as if the crate had decided what sound to make in advance and stuck to it. I didn't sleep well after that shift. Small things came with me. A sensation in my hands like cold metal under thin gloves. The memory of the dust disturbed in the shape of a foot. The feel of a building turning its attention in a direction that happens to include you. I told myself it was stress. Nights build a kind of echo in you. You carry it home, and eventually it carries you. On the 4th night, I brought an extra flashlight and an old analog tape recorder I found in a desk drawer. It was the kind with a real tape, the kind that clicks when you press stop and makes you feel like you've told time where to hold still. I placed it on the office counter, hit record, and left it running while I did my rounds. If anyone asked, I could say I was dictating maintenance notes. The draft returned at 12:52. I checked the camera and saw the sliver under door 4 again, but now there were tiny particulate currents moving toward the door, like the air itself was deciding which way to go. When I walked the corridor, I found the prints immediately, as if they had been set out for me. They were a little clearer, like someone had decided I deserved clarity. They led to the center of the corridor and stopped abruptly, as if the person who had made them had been lifted. There is a particular quality of silence certain spaces produce, the way a person's face has a particular silence you love or hate. The corridor's silence that night had a new edge, like listening under a blanket. I turned in a slow circle with the light and caught a flicker at the edge of door 4, movement not like a hand or a foot, but like vibration, a small ripple in the metal that ran across the panel and vanished. I felt it more than saw it. The building felt like it had swallowed a breath and didn't know what to do with it. I did the one thing that has always worked for me when I don't understand what a space wants. I stood still long enough to see if it decided to show me. I stood until my knees ached and my palms felt the cold rising through the flashlight's body. The prints didn't change. The draft stayed the same. The ripple didn't return. Eventually, I locked the door again with the manual release and went back to the monitors. I rewound the tape later on lunch with my feet on a box, and the heater pointed straight at my shins. The office smelled like dust warmed fast. The tape captured the corridor's breath, the small chatter of the radio, and a faint rhythmic sound I could have called anything. Machines spooling down, chains somewhere in the building tapping softly against metal. It also captured something I couldn't place, a long exhale that slowed as if drawn out, then stilled. It could have been me. I didn't think it was. I left the recorder running until the end of shift. When I played back the section around 2:10 a.m., I heard the same long exhale, then a single knock like knuckle to wood, then nothing for a full minute, as if even tape can feel a space hold its breath. I labeled the cassette North Bay and put it in the drawer. I didn't bring it back out. On the 5th night, the warehouse decided, I can't prove that, but you know when a pattern clicks into place and stops pretending it's random. The draft came sooner, before midnight, like someone eager to get on with it. The sliver under door 4 looked wider, or my brain finally gave up on pretending. I took the flashlight and the radio, and something in the back of my head told me not to bring the recorder. The prints were fresh. I knew that without testing them because the edges looked new, and because a thin layer of dust had settled since we'd swept, and the prints lay on top of that layer, not under it. They led away from door 4, not to the pallets this time, but straight down the corridor toward the office. I followed them past the staging area, past the utility sink, past the fire door to the east lot. They grew fainter as they approached the office, as if whoever made them had weighed less with each step. The last print stopped 6 feet from the office door. I stood there in the thin light coming from my own office window and felt watched by something positioned exactly where I would have stood to watch myself. The monitors inside showed the corridor from the camera's angle, a clean composition of floor, wall, door. No one there. On screen, I was a figure in a high-vis vest, holding a light in a building that had no opinion about me. At the threshold, another opinion waited. I turned the handle and pushed the door open slow. The room was exactly as I'd left it, chair slightly back, pen at an angle on the log, coffee cup with a ring of dried bitterness around the inside. The heater ticked its quiet pattern. The cassette deck sat with its lid closed, no tape in the well. I stood in the doorway longer than I stood anywhere else that month. Sometimes the most frightening spaces are the ones that look exactly how they should. On the monitor showing the north corridor, a shape passed behind me without passing behind me. It was the kind of reflected movement you notice peripherally and then can't replay. I turned, light up. The corridor was empty. The prints still ended where they ended. The door to the office stood open behind me. The air felt colder on the back of my neck than on my face. I don't have a better description for that. I forced myself back into the corridor and walked to door 4 with the steady pace of someone whose legs want to run and whose job description doesn't include running. The sliver of light was still there. I crouched and set my palm near the gap. The draft that came through felt not just cold, but deliberate, like breath near skin. I pictured ordinary explanations, pressure differentials, outside wind, the tower fans we sometimes rolled near the docks to dry floors. I pictured whatever I needed to keep from picturing a barefoot on concrete. When I slid the bar out of its cradle to drop the manual release, the door moved on its own. Not much. A soft, downward shudder as if something outside had let go. The panel settled the last fraction. The rubber sweep met the floor. The draft stopped. The little green closed indicator blinked once, then went dark, like an eye thinking better of winking. I stood, backing up a few steps, then a few more, until the door was a rectangle at the end of a long hall again, and I could pretend it was just a door. The radio cracked one clean time, an open carrier with no voice, and cut out. Somewhere, far down the racks, something tapped twice and stopped. A code between machines I wasn't invited to learn. I stayed at that building for 3 more weeks. I did my job. I wrote sensible notes. I never again found prints that obvious, but once you've seen a certain pattern, you find its faint relatives everywhere. Smears that could be anything. Dust that refuses to settle in a straight line. Drafts that know when you notice them. I started leaving the North Corridor for last and walking it like a place of worship. The last week, maintenance replaced the sweep on door 4 and adjusted the track. They logged it. They fixed it. They wrote the kind of entry that makes a company feel neat and finished. The sliver under the door didn't return on the cameras for the rest of my time. The drafts moved to other doors or never existed. On my final shift, I stood in the corridor one more time and listened for the building's breath. It sounded like a big animal sleeping after a hunt you didn't see. I quit without making a scene. I told the supervisor I wanted days. I told myself I'd sleep better if I had sunlight on my face when I clocked out. The city at 7 a.m. looks like a promise. The city at 3 a.m. looks like a confession. I chose promises for a while. A month later, I stopped by to drop off a badge I'd forgotten to turn in. The new night guy was there, a kid who looked too fresh to have the look the building would eventually give him. He asked if the heater in the office ever made a clicking sound, even when it was off. I said heaters click. He said the radio sometimes keyed itself for a second, with no one on the channel. I said radios do that. He said door 4 had been solid ever since maintenance replaced the sweep. I told him that was good. On my way out, I glanced at the monitor wall. One of the 6 tiles showed the North Corridor. The framing was perfect, clean lines converging on a rectangle of steel. The door was down, no light at the bottom, no draft. For a second, no more. I thought I saw a pale oval at the edge of the frame, at shin height, where dust holds shapes until motion teaches it to forget. Then it was gone, and I was looking at a picture of a hallway that exists to be looked at. The building is still there. When I drive past at night on the highway, I can see the faint glow of the exterior lamps and the long run of the north wall, like the spine of something lying on its side. Nothing about it asks for attention. That's the part I think about most. The ordinary places are the ones that keep what happens in them. The places with cameras that show you what you need to believe. The places with doors that almost lock. I didn't keep the cassette. I wish I had. Not because I think it would prove anything. It wouldn't. It would be tape with air on it, a knock that could be building noise, a breath that could be mine. I wish I had it because at night, when I can't sleep, I still hear that long exhale, and it would be a comfort to know it belongs somewhere other than in my head. People ask sometimes, people who like stories like this, what I would have done if I'd caught someone on the camera, or found someone barefoot in the aisles, or pressed my palm to the sliver under the door and felt a human hand press back. I don't have an answer that satisfies them. I had a job. The job was to check doors and write notes. I did the job. I left when I understood that the job included being seen by something that didn't sign the log. If you work nights long enough, you learn that the world continues without you and that you are mostly there to notice the small ways it does. A sliver of light where there shouldn't be one. Prints that start and don't return. Air that seems to choose. If you're lucky, you'll file your notes and go home at dawn and forget. If you're not, you'll go home and remember. I remember in a steady way, the way a building breathes when it's waiting for you to put your hand on the door one more time and feel that the difference between open and closed is thinner than you thought. I don't go back. I don't check the cameras online. I don't ask the new guy if the heater clicks when it's off or if the radio keys when the corridor is empty. I don't need to know. The thing about doors is simple. Some keep weather out, some keep things in, and some, if you work them at the wrong hour, teach you that there was never much of a difference.